Ambassador Chan, some people say that you shouldn't be surprised by what Trump has done. He did exactly what he said he would do. Has anything surprised you?
Yes, President Trump, candidate Donald J. Trump, ran on the promise of disruption. And he laid out all the policies that he said he would do. And he did exactly that. But still, I think most of us were shocked and some were awed. Why? I think it's because of the speed in which things have happened, the speed, the scope, and perhaps the extent. And that has really surprised everyone. So whilst we anticipated that he would bring on tariffs, he would address immigration, he would, in fact, deal with the deep state, and that's internally, is domestic and international. Whilst these policies unfolded, I think, some really didn't expect the way it would turn out.
For Trump, he's chosen dominance over stability, loyalty over law. What might that entail in the next 100 days, you think?
The President Trump has definite objectives, Some people say he doesn't have objectives. I don't believe that. He has objectives. His strategy is not clear. But his objectives are, firstly, he has a very deep grievance about the way that America has been taken advantage of in trade. America is buying everybody's goods, but people are buying less of American goods. Mind you, we buy American services, loads of American services. But then I think he would like to see America become a manufacturing powerhouse again. He promised he would handle immigration, and I think he also is very uncomfortable with liberal values domestically and liberal values in the international order. So for the next 100 days, he will continue to do what he's doing, trying to reach these objectives.
And of course, allies, neighbors, friends, a lot of them have become foes, and they've had to adapt and navigate. If you take a look at Europe, it is building its own defenses, it's increased its defense budget, for instance. If you take a look at South Korea, it's thinking about going the nuclear way. How are you looking at whether or not these countries will undo the measures that they're adopting at this point in time when the next president comes around? How easy is it to undo the measures that are being adopted right now?
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, I would like to correct this. I don't think many of America's allies and partners see America as a foe, even though they are very uncomfortable with what the United States, the policies seem to be portending, the tariff war and so on. What do countries do? They try to bargain, talk their way out, see whether you can land at a different space. Secondly, countries hope that somehow some deal, there'll be some retreat. Maybe America will reach its epiphany and believe that trade is not so bad, tariffs could be stepped back from. I think people are hoping for some good space to land where they would land. And because President Trump has been unpredictable, there's reciprocal tariffs and he pulls it back 90 days and so on. So the question is, in the end, who is the target? Are all these countries target, or is it just targeted at China? And countries are doing different things. But it is true, you are right. In terms of defense, President Trump has in fact indicated that he wants to deconstruct the order that America has created, that countries should not expect a free ride on American defense and assistance. And in a way, we have been free riding, so countries can expect to pay more. I think that will happen. And so there's some adjustment there. But I think you see hedging. They're not foes, but they'll hedge. They hedge in different ways. the countries can hedge by forming minilaterals. America's there, and I think people believe America is a huge market, huge engine, and is really still the largest military force. But will they come to help you when you are in crisis? So countries then begin to form minilaterals. And in my region, in our region in Asia, you see this. Australia and Japan come together, Japan, Australia, Korea, US is there. The United States has promised, in fact, has said it wants to be an offshore balancer. It would like to support you, but, not to have boots on the ground, send you equipment. So countries have now to adjust to that. So that's what they're doing. And so they're building their own defenses. Will they dismantle it? What you invest is hard to dismantle. And if countries go the nuclear route, it's very hard to unwind.
You talk about hedging. Does hedging involve getting closer to China? Have you seen that? Do you expect that?
Hedging will, countries at the moment is only 100 days, all right? And people are
quite a good indication of what can be expected in the country.
Yes, I think but there are many countries that are still just trying to deal with the tariffs immediately. They haven't moved to the next phase yet. So, and it seems now, if you look over the 100 days, the countries that dealt or are dealing with President Trump, the United States, with some calm and in a collected, poised way, seem to be having some effect. Show strength and you'll be respected. So there's a bit of that. If you look at the cases, Mark Carney, Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico, so countries are remaining slightly calm. And President Trump, he listens, and sometimes he changes his mind. So that can happen. So coming back to your question, then what will they do, So I think in terms of whether they will move towards China immediately, there are signals. China is talking to Europe. Europe is talking to China. What I think has changed most is that what President Biden did, which was to collect all the countries in Europe, gather the Europeans in a kind of coalition, a loose coalition to balance China, to counter China. I think Europeans are now not going to go there so easily,
But how do you see China capitalizing on the opportunity? It has indicated it's willing to put boots on the ground in Ukraine even.
Well, they are mercenaries, I believe, right now. I don't think China has actually said they'll put boots on the ground,
As peacekeepers.
I beg your pardon?
As peacekeepers, boots on the ground in peacekeeping missions.
Yes, peacekeeping missions, yes, of course, I think every country will want to participate in peacekeeping, The thing is, China has not yet, I think, China has done some things. President Xi is visiting many countries, and I would expect that. It's natural, He had these visits planned to Southeast Asia even before Donald Trump, had his inauguration. So, trips like this are planned long time ahead. So he was going to do this anyway. And it's only natural. Power abhors a vacuum. So if there is space, there's opportunity, why shouldn't China go in? With friends, establish trade ties, yes, you will see that, And yes, the question is whether, it is a replacement for the United States. It's too soon to tell.
For President Trump, essentially, it is about putting a lid on China's influence and China's ambitions.
Not just President Trump.
Previous administration as well, but for Trump in particular, this time around. In 2019, we had Henry Kissinger talking about how the US and China were on the foothills of a Cold War. And I can only imagine that President Trump has accelerated that process. How are you looking at that? And what are the repercussions?
No, Haslinda. Actually, when President Trump first was elected, the gestures towards China were good. And people were expecting, and at some stage we were talking, could there be the big deal? The big deal between the United States and China. People were expecting that because when President Trump had his second assassination attempt, President Xi Jinping wrote him a letter. Now, it must have been, I hope you are well and you will recover. Because candidate Trump mentioned on his campaign trail, I received a letter from Xi Jinping. I think he spoke well of President Xi, and he never, in fact, criticized, President Xi. So people were expecting that there'd be a grand bargain that would take place. Grand bargain with Putin, grand bargain with President Xi. But it did not happen, but in the beginning. So President Xi was invited to the inauguration. So people expected, is there going to be a grand bargain there? So I would not say President Trump himself comes to the table feeling very hostile and wanting to contain China. Now, he wants to win, for sure, America first, and any American president, and President Trump, I think, would want to see America dominant. So there will be this contest, and it's a structural thing that you have rising power, status quo power. There will be a clash head to head.
How do they coexist? How can they coexist?
People are hoping, wiser people would. Some people say no, but there must be some space where they can coexist. I think we hope they can. Asia is hoping they can, because otherwise it would be very difficult, awkward. But it is not impossible, because I think you've seen in the first 100 days what has happened, that President Trump sort of imposed the tariffs, but then you have to roll them back because there's too much dependence. I think something like 70% of smartphones in America sold in America are made in China. So, of course, if you buy toys, party things, carnival stuff is 80%. I saw that list, So a lot of things are made in China. So, and the concern and investment. So I think some sort of, as we said, the businesses are all looking to some kind of settlement, some kind of agreement on one level. You can't solve all the problems, but if you can solve things on one level, some narrower things, it will buy time, create a smoother atmosphere. The very fact that we hear that Scott Bessent and his economic team would go to Switzerland to meet the Chinese senior people, everyone is so happy. Markets are doing better. Every time you hear that some talks are possible, things, you find the market behaving more calmly. So markets want that. And I believe President Trump is a person who would like to see the markets do well under him. He does not want to see inflation, and he's not a man of war. So these are some positive factors. So I'm hopeful. President Xi Jinping, China doesn't want war. They have their own issues and problems. He wants to settle that. China wants a calmer environment. So how do you settle that, I think both sides know they cannot solve all their problems, but what can they settle? And if they do that, it restores some stability, and we build from there. One cannot give a roadmap in such a relationship, this tense head-to-head relationship. I would not give a roadmap, you build, you see what happens with the first positive step, build on that. The next step, I think that's how good things will proceed.
Okay. For Singapore and countries in Southeast Asia, they've always maintained they do not want to take sides.
Yes.
Not the US, not China. But when elephants fight,
Indeed.
the grass gets trampled. Can these countries continue not taking a side and not paying the price for it?
You ask me that question, I will of course say we believe we can. And we will do the best we can to remain in that position where you don't have to choose sides, you know. It's going to get harder, you know, and I think that's how we will proceed. In the end, it depends on each country, because some countries have a lot to do with the United States. Some countries have a lot to do with China. So things stack up, you know.
Can there be, should there be, a regional response? And have you seen any efforts?
There has been a regional response. First of all, I think because the United States was turning protectionist, and we saw this very clearly, you know, first, I think towards the end of the Obama term, in the first, trade was not, in fact, a good word. Today, trade is a bad word in Washington, D.C., you know, and in the first Trump term, in the Biden term, and now Trump 2.0, trade is a bad word. So we know that. And ASEAN countries, Asian countries, have long tried to form groupings. We have RCEP, the Regional Economic Comprehensive Partnership. You know, it's ASEAN plus different countries. Japan, China, Korea, Australia, New Zealand. India was in it, but India pulled out of it. You know, so that's RCEP. And then there's CPTPP. Now, the idea is that these are trading blocs, free trading, following WTO rules. And if we have these trading spaces, two big spaces, where free trade carries on, investment flows, you keep that space open. And so somewhere in the world, certainly in Asia, you know, we want to keep free trade, free investment flows going. Now, this doesn't exclude the US, by the way, because CPTPP is open to the US. And should the US one day want to return, they can. But, you know, but these two trading groupings have, you know, will preserve that space. And now the latest talk is that maybe we should have CPTPP join or work with the European Union. And if these two regions, you know, tie up, that would be great. And I'm told people are lining up, countries, I mean, are lining up to join RCEP, and countries are lining up for membership in CPTPP.
Ambassador, you've been Singapore's ambassador to the US for
16 years.
16 years, 3 presidents?
3 presidents.
3 presidents.
Yeah.
Would you say that this is the most challenging time in relations between the two countries?
You mean Singapore
and the US?
No, I would not say that. We have big problems. I thought I had a very challenging time when I arrived during the Clinton administration, and we had just beat the backside of a naughty boy. You know? So, you know, and I had to help restore relations, you know. But, you know, diplomats like challenges. I would not want to go somewhere where I just play golf or, you know, watch, sail or swim or whatever. You know, you want issues, you want to deal with challenges. But I think I would not say the relationship with the United States now for Singapore is the most difficult. We have a 10% tariff, it's the universal tariff. The one thing about Singapore is that the United States has a trade surplus with us, 30 billion trade in trade surplus.
That's how the Prime Minister expresses disappointment.
And we have no tariffs, so the 10% is universal. We wish we didn't have it, but we hope to talk about that.
Just one final question before we go, because my producer has just said that I need to wrap up. Do you see Trump running for another term, and what that might mean for the world?
Who knows?
What's your guess?
President Trump has said maybe, he's just said maybe it's J.D. Vance, maybe it is Marco Rubio. But of course, some have said, hey, President Putin did that too. He put Medvedev there, and he became the vice president. So, but, it's very hard to predict. And I would not want to put my reputation, or, country on that bet.